Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in for last year's top 10 video games of 2024. Um, I had some things going on toward the end of last year, and despite my best efforts to get this out in January, I failed to do so. So we're going to try and get it out this month and get it up on YouTube. So for people who haven't listened before, the way this usually works is at the beginning I say some general things about last year in gaming, and then kind of move into my top 10 list. I would say 2024 was in a lot of ways similar to 2023. At least there were a lot of similarities between the two years. But I feel like 2024, if 2023 was the beginning of some problems, rearing their ugly head, 2024 is when the beast was fully unveiled, so to speak. It was a difficult year for the industry, I think. Layoffs continued. We'll talk about sort of live service game struggles, lots of studio closures. I think overall, there's a statistic going around that something like 35,000 or even potentially tens of thousands of more people working in the industry lost their jobs over the course of 2023 and 2024 when you add everything up. And that is a lot of people. It was also an interesting year for a genre that I, in particular, am attached to, the strategy 4X genre. Their continued quest for innovation in that genre yielded some interesting results last year. And I think I'd like to start there. The big kind of uncontested dominator of the genre, the 4X genre in general, and definitely the historical 4X genre, is Sid Meier's Civilization. And Sid Meier's Civilization 6 came out something like 8 years ago, around that neighborhood, and you started to see with Humankind several years ago, studios kind of step up and try to get some of that audience and bring some new ideas to the table. Humankind had varying degrees of success on its various ideas and innovations, and I would say the games that came out in 2024 also did, but I think the reason it's important is because we've never seen this many. It sounds sort of confrontational when put this way, but we've never seen this many games sort of come after Sid Meier's Civilization legacy before. We've never seen, and I don't think they're coming after the legacy. I think it's just born out of a desire of people and studios to try and innovate in the genre. And so having sort of 4 to 5 recent examples, Humankind being a couple years ago, Age of Wonders was 2 years ago, maybe a year ago. That one is a little weird because I wouldn't say it's a 4X in the same way that some of these other ones are 4Xs. And even the two that I'm going to be addressing here, Millennia and Ara History Untold, Millennia is probably the most 4X of those two. Ara, you could make an argument, is not even a 4X game. It's really it really puts a premium and puts front and center this sort of resource management and good refinement system that's much more akin to something like you'd see in Anno than in a 4X game. But that's also part of what makes it so interesting. So those two games in particular came out last year. And they definitely had some very interesting ideas about how things should work. Both of them went more in the direction of, resource management and production lines and production chains, Millennia has a lot of really interesting mechanics and things going on for it all throughout the game. And Ara is significantly more focused on the economic and goods produced and production chain end of things, almost to the point that it really does play like an Anno game. It's like if an Anno game had the more measured pace of a 4X and was turn-based instead of real time. And that's kind of the way that Ara plays to me. But regardless of the relative merits of their innovations and mechanics and such, I would say it's just nice to see games coming out in that genre that have a different take on the genre and have new ideas to put down on the table for players and people who are particularly interested in that genre, myself included. I had mentioned live service games before. 2024 was the year I think a lot of the struggles in that part of the industry really came to a head. It affects me directly because I play a lot of live service games. I have a lot of live service games that vie for my attention, and I have a lot of games that kind of straddle both sides of the live service fence, where they are released as full-priced products, but they have a roadmap and they have season passes, and the idea is that they will be supported for a couple of years before the studio moves on to the next thing. So it's kind of hard to know where to start with this topic, because there are a lot of different aspects to it, and there are a lot of different things to talk about it with. I think it was the year that publishers in particular realized that you actually cannot just make another live service game and expect it to do the numbers that Fortnite does, that Valorant does, and that other free-to-play live service games do. Mostly because they didn't account for one thing, the most finite and yet infinite resource of them all, which is time. Players only have so much time to dedicate to whatever they are playing. And all of these live service games have systems and mechanics that are designed to keep players engaged for long periods of time. And so if you are someone who plays primarily live service games and free-to-play games that have constant, near constant content drips, you can only manage to fit in one or two of those into your life, unless you happen to be a teenager who's really smart in high school and never has any homework, and you have all the time in the day and don't have a job on the weekends. Maybe you can, manage 4 of those at a time. But for everybody else who, lives on their own and has to work for a living and has bills to pay and things to do and errands to run and a household to manage, you can't really do more than 1 or 2 of those. And even then, you're not really doing the second one. You're kind of, at least in my experience, you're kind of like staying afloat, so to speak. For when the inevitable time comes that you get bored of the first one that you're playing and you stop playing it, so that you have somewhere to pick up in the second one and don't have as much work to do to get up to speed. I'm not speaking from personal experience there. Definitely not. So it kind of came. That realization kind of came all at once. I feel like in 2024. There were lots of conversations about Concord and the reason it failed. Destiny 2 player numbers are way down. Sony canceled a bunch of live service projects. I think we're up to 7 at this point, that were multiplayer or multiplayer focused live service games. WB has canceled a bunch of live service projects, most recently Multiverses. MMO numbers have dropped, with the curious exception of World of Warcraft, but there's a reason for that. And the content that is being released for MMOs is really smaller in scope now. We've seen Lost Ark really pare back its the scope of its game with every update it releases. It's cutting content to focus on the new content being added to the game. You see, which players are not happy about. You see Elder Scrolls Online really kind of focusing the scope of their chapters, which I think aren't even going to be called chapters anymore. And they're kind of paring down the content drips, not as often throughout the year. You see World of Warcraft kind of picking up steam, interestingly. Final Fantasy XIV is in my estimation, has kind of plateaued. Like, I just don't see as many people talking and buzzing about that game as I used to. But all of that to say is, I think a lot of places lost money on live service games this year, and chief among them is Sony and Warner Brothers. And it's really baffling to me that Sony thought it would be that easy. Let's start a whole bunch of live service projects. Oh shit, we don't know what we're doing. Okay, let's have Bungie kind of be a consultant on these. Oh, Bungie actually knows what they're doing. Let's buy Bungie. They're independent now, right? Oh God. Bungie fucked up. Oh God, maybe they don't. Oh, okay, let's cancel all those live service games. Like Destiny 2 did not meet its sales goals. That number that went around was like 45% or something like that. Either way, a lot of the layoffs, interestingly enough, that you've seen have come from some of the Sony live service studios. Bungie lost to the tune of, I want to say, 300 to 400 people. They went from like 1,100 to 800. The Concord studio was shut down. You've seen a lot of Sony studio closures in general. And you've also seen a few Microsoft layoffs as well, but they were more broad. It's a much bigger company than Sony, and it wasn't just Xbox Studios and the Xbox brand that experienced layoff. That went across all of Microsoft. But it was definitely a trend in 2024, and it does make you wonder how they're going to sort of recalibrate for 2025, what the priorities are going to be. I would assume they really want the live service games that they left intact to really ship and get out the door so they don't continue to bleed money. Bungie's next project that supposedly had a rough closed testing phase with some of the people they invited to play it. I would imagine they're full speed ahead, and word on the street is that a lot of their development resources are focusing on that game. I forget what was it, Monument or something like that? But it was definitely a trend last year, and I think going into this year, there's a lot of focus on the Switch 2. There's a lot of focus on the PS5 and the Xbox consoles getting games. But there's also a lot of exciting stuff coming out this year. Monster Hunter comes out later this month. The Doom game is going to come out. Civ 7 came out last week. I've been playing that. So there's definitely no shortage of things to keep your eye on and to look at. I think all of that said, I will go ahead and take us into our top 10 now. And we'll start at number 10 with a game that I just talked about a little bit ago, which was Millennia. Millennia is my 10th best game of the year. As should be obvious by now, it is of last year. It is a 4X historical, well, pseudo historical 4X game, let's say. I think this is a game that cares more about its mechanics and its systems than it does any kind of representation of the history that it kind of moves around or uses at Liberty in its gameplay. You do, it's pretty standard historical 4X stuff. You pick a nation, but it doesn't really matter. It's just like what you're calling yourself and what your cities are going to be named and the flag that will be used to represent you on the map. There's only one bonus, and they're very simple things like more movement to your infantry or +1 production toward this specific kind of building, +1 production toward gold buildings or whatever. But the thing that really sets Millennia apart, and I think this is a problem with genre fans in general, is they constantly say they want innovation and they want new things, but then are also constantly complaining when, uh, you know, new systems and innovation, comes out and innovation happens, and because it is not exactly and precisely as they would like it to be, um, it gets shit all over, and that's kind of what happened with Millennia. A lot of it was fair. There were a lot of performance issues. Then again, I know 4X gamers, and a lot of them are gaming on computers from 1764, so they are in their head expect everything to work forever and run everything forever. Um, I never had that many problems with it. It definitely could use some optimization, but it wasn't crashing my computer like it was for some people trying to run it on a 12-year-old CPU on a 1080 Ti. Um, Millennia takes some aspects of Civilization, it takes some aspects of Anno, and it takes some aspects of a Paradox Grand Strategy game and kind of mash it all into one game. You are engaged in the development of the economy and managing production lines and refining goods. And a lot of that happens at the building level, like buildings. You might have 4 copper mines, which you then use the copper. You can take the 4 copper and turn the copper into a public works building that produces more water, and you can take that water and then you can later in the game move it to nuclear power plants and use it to generate electricity. So you're managing that system, and you're also engaging with this kind of mana-esque system from a Paradox game. If you've ever played Europa Universalis 4, or even some of the mana from like Stellaris, where you're accumulating these points. In Stellaris, it's called Unity, and in Europa Universalis 4, you have like admin points, Diplo points, and I think Warfare points. And you're accumulating these points, and you can spend them on various things as the game progresses. And Millennia has that too, but they break it down into what are called domains. And these domains are things sort of germane to historical topics, when you're talking about the development of civilization and humanity and that kind of thing. Things like exploration and government and engineering. What's another one? Arts and culture, religion. And you get like literal powers. Like you can spend these points on powers or skills or whatever abilities that you can activate that impact the game or the map in some way. They are also paired with national spirits. So the game has an age system similar to Humankind and similar to Ara and similar to Civ 7. That seems to be the big innovation from Humankind that everyone else picked up on after the release of that game, which is that there's been this attempt in the genre to sort of put guardrails around the player's experience of a game and say, in this part of the game, these are the systems and mechanics that you will experience, and in this part of the game, this is the set of systems and mechanics you will experience, and sometimes it's just simply a matter of adding on or layering more on top. Sometimes it's about fundamentally saying goodbye to everything that made the previous, era unique, and you get a completely new set of mechanics and systems, as is the case with like Civ 7. And Millennia also does that, but it does that by presenting you with the ability to unlock an era to transition into. So when you go, say, from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age, you might have 4 different possible ages that you could enter when you go from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age. One of them will be just Age of Bronze. It will be the typical sort of historical 4X Age of Bronze that you're used to. Another one in that particular age transition is Age of Heroes. And what the Age of Heroes does is it unlocks some unique mechanics, and it gives you access to a special hero unit that you can only get if you transition into the Age of Heroes. In order to transition into the Age of Heroes, you have to have met its sort of transition objective in the previous age. And so every age is like this. And when you get to the later part of the game, you can transition into some pretty... And that's why I said historical-ish at the beginning when I started talking about this game, because some of them are ahistorical. Some of them are more like science fiction. Like they lean into steampunk and like harvesting aether in the clouds, and there's even in the later part of the game, there's an age of aliens, like they call it the Age of Contact, where like literal fucking aliens come to Earth. So it's really interesting and innovative, and there's always a lot of things to manage and do. That I see it as a really good entry into the genre, and I really wish more people had played it. It's a Paradox published game, but I don't think a lot of people were totally hyped. They clearly didn't have a huge marketing budget. Paradox, at the time this game came out, was going through that weird transition where the person who was the CEO was kind of being asked to leave because all of the projects that she wanted to do kind of flopped, or they were just bleeding money on developing, and then the guy who used to lead Paradox took over, and he was like, we're back to doing it old school and the things that we know, and that means a lot of strategy games. And it feels like Millennia kind of got lost in the shuffle of that and never really got the time of day from its publisher, and by extension, really at this point, only the hardest of hardcore 4Xers, I think, are really playing Millennia. It just didn't have the broad appeal because, it's running on a shoestring budget, very clearly, compared to its nearest competitors of the last couple of years. Like, it looks the worst of the 4, Humankind, Ara, Civ 7, and Millennia. It has the most jank of the 4. I would say, however, that it's mechanically, it's actually the most interesting of those 4. It has the most different and innovative and cool stuff of those 4. And for those reasons, that's why it's number 10 on my list. Number 9 is going to be Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. Oh boy. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink is ostensibly, it's just a character action game that's very grindy. Think like a Muso game, but with Grand Blue Fantasy characters. But the structure is more like, yes, there's a story and there's a campaign. You can play through it cooperatively. I did so with my husband, Henry. And we had a blast. Like, we loved every second of it. And then there's an end game that's really based around just grinding. So if you don't like grinding for hours and hours and hours and hours, potentially not getting the thing that you're trying to grind for, then you won't like this game after the story. But personally, I feel like there's always something to progress. But it's a really high production value, really great moments, really great showpieces and set pieces, really great boss battles, really great characters with defined and interesting styles of play. It's best played with other people. I think the problem you have now is the population is not like super high in this game anymore, so you do have trouble matchmaking. That said, if you go into the end of the game and you're trying to do missions, you can build out your AI companions. There's maximum four people. You can build out your AI companions in such a way that they they do just fine. Like you can still solo some of the hardest content in the game. It will be difficult, but Grand Blue Fantasy really, I don't have much more to say about it. Other than what I just said. It's just a really good time. It feels a little old school character action game. In the same way that like Devil May Cry or Ninja Gaiden, like those old Koei and Konami games, are. Um, it's a game for people who like grinding, man. It's like if you're the type of person who really likes to grind, Dynasty Warriors for every costume and every weapon, and doing every level on Ultimate Warrior with every character, with then you will feel right at home in Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, I think. Excellent game. Pick it up on a sale. I think these days it's on sale usually whenever there's a major Steam sale. Number 8. Yes. Number 8 is Last Epoch. And Last Epoch is a game I've been waiting to address. It's been in early access for many, many years, but it finally came out in 2024. And the conversation around Last Epoch when it came out was interesting. It was impossible to listen to conversations or watch conversations or videos or content about this game without it eventually or inevitably being compared to Diablo 4, which came out before it but had been kind of in the conversation for a while, and Path of Exile. And the thing that you will often hear people parrot about Last Epoch online is, oh, it's like halfway between Path of Exile and Diablo 4. It's not like you need a PhD to play the game like you do for Path of Exile, but it's also not for casual dad gamers like Diablo 4 is. And it's an apt, if crude, sort of way of describing Last Epoch. I think it is ultimately a generalization that doesn't do the game any favors, however, I would say, because you're not really telling people, and this is, I think, part of the problem they faced with marketing the game in general. You're not really telling people what makes the game, like, why should I play this over Diablo 4 or Path of Exile? And that's always the uphill battle that you're going to face anytime you try to release a game to take on, sort of those two titans of the genre. Here's the deal with Last Epoch. I think a lot of people would say this shouldn't even be on my top 10 list. But first of all, it's my top 10 list, so fuck off. Second of all, Last Epoch, I think it leaves a bad taste in people's mouths because the developers they kind of fumbled the couple of months leading up to release and basically the entire time communicating post-release. They set certain expectations about this game that they didn't meet, and I will get to that in a bit, but first I want to talk a little bit more about the kind of game it is. It's an action RPG. It's a Diablo. It's a Path of Exile. As far as what you're doing and the play and all of that kind of stuff goes. You have a dude or a girl, and the dude or the girl kills stuff, and you level up, and you progress your character, and you get items, and you do item progression and character progression, and you do crafting, and you get to an end game, and you're doing, the equivalent of PoE maps, and like it is very much that game. What makes Last Epoch different is that similar to Path of Exile, you do have classes, and those classes are the characters, and those classes have sort of three advanced classes they can spec into at a certain point in the game. I think there's 6 total, 5 or 6 total, so you either come out with 15 or 20 advanced classes when it's all said and done. And what's interesting and different about Last Epoch is the fact that every skill has its own skill tree. In addition to your class kind of having its own skill tree a la Grim Dawn's class skill trees, every advanced class has its own set of skills, and those skills have skill trees. So you can take what is a multi-shot for your archer, and you can turn that into a massive single shot that pierces in a line ice skill that will chill and freeze enemies instead. And then you can have sort of a detonator that goes along with that. The thing that is interesting about this is that it makes build variety and build possibility really interesting, and something that's cool to kind of mess around with in this game. Unlike skill tree in Path of Exile, or unlike the god-awful shit-tier skill trees, excuse me, I'm doing bunny quotes right now, skill trees in Diablo 4, the possibility for builds and, the same skill can act and do so many different things that you could play the same character with the same skill and have 2 or 3 different play styles around that skill. Which to me is really one of its defining and really kind of cool things that sets it apart and above those other 2 games. So all of that to say, it is not as polished as the production value is not as high as like a Diablo 4. Diablo 4 is by far the best looking and probably the best sounding and best animated of those 3 games by a long shot. I personally have always found Path of Exile to feel pretty janky. A lot of other people say that Last Epoch feels janky to them. I get what they mean, but I actually like the way it feels. It's a little more floaty. The skills don't have this kind of like artificial crunch audio to indicate real big or heavy hits. That's not to say that I don't think that the hit feedback could be a little better in the Last Epoch. I think it definitely could. But I guess that doesn't really matter to me in the bad direction. Like, I only notice it when it's really exceptional, like it is in Diablo 4. I'm like, damn, that big hammer swing felt fucking amazing. But when it feels bad, or it's a little loose and a little, flighty and light, it doesn't, unless it's floaty to the point where, like, it feels like my hits are missing because things are weird, then it doesn't bother me that much. So, the thing that I think has caused a lot of people to fall off is that they set up an expectation leading it up to the months of this game coming out, in which they added, they delayed the release twice, by the way, for a total of like 6 or 7 months extra, just so they could add multiplayer into the game, which now most people aren't even playing because most people aren't playing this game. I think most people are playing PoE 2 now, seeing as how it's sitting in the top 10 most played games on Steam pretty consistently ever since it came out in early access. But they set up a certain expectation with Last Epoch that it would have a similar cadence of League releases a la Path of Exile, and that it would have a similar set of content for those leagues. In other words, whole-ass designed systems and mechanics that the player is meant to engage with. And that didn't happen. They didn't release with the first season. It was like a season light. They had to scale back the content so much. Season 1 came out with half the content cut. They said that would come in season 2. Season 2 was then delayed. It is now coming out in March with content cut. And they just have kind of waffled on a lot of decisions that they need to make in order to kind of set expectations with the players. And so their big thing is they listen to feedback, they listen to the community, like to the point where they literally have people vote on whether or not they should make a certain change, and they make the change based on the result of the vote, which I think is, sorry, I'm with John Adams on this one. Like, that level of mob rule for the ARPG community is going to lead you to make some really stupid decisions, and it's going to put you in this spot, like exactly what happened, where every time you don't give a straight answer, you are going to be hounded and hounded and hounded and hounded by the community, who now thinks they have some sort of say in development for an answer, and then you're going to have to say something. Then you're going to have to tell the community something. And every time they have to tell the community something, it's just disappointing. It's disappointing, or it's poorly communicated and expectations are not set or met on either side. And it's just like, I feel like they had a rough landing, and they've kind of like skirt on the landing strip ever since then. They've just never managed to really right the ship. That said, what is there is great. It's fantastic. Of those, well, I guess 4, PoE 1, PoE 2 now, Diablo 4, and Last Epoch. Last Epoch is definitely the one I would rather play out of those 4. And I do plan on rolling a character for when the second season comes out in March. That was supposed to come out like 6 months ago, but hey, whatever, who's keeping track? Yeah, it's good. If you like ARPGs, I would encourage you to give it a try. I've thoroughly enjoyed its development in the time that I played it for like 2.5 years, waiting for 1.0 to come out. 1.0 came out. When I look at the game as it is now versus like what I was playing, it's vastly, vastly improved compared to what early access was like just 2.5 years ago. That brings us to number 7. Number 7 is Roots of Yggdrasil. Roots of Yggdrasil is a turn-based, card-based city builder ? Roguelike? It. How do I describe this game? Fuck. Think Against the Storm, but with cards, I guess. So let me see if I can package this up a little more digestively for you. Digestibly? Whatever. Roots of Yggdrasil is at its core, it's a roguelike. Okay? So there is meta progression built into the game. You're doing a Slay the Spire-esque, kind of trip through a tree of choice. Like you could go here, you could go here. Which one do you want to go to? They have different rewards or payouts or whatever. But let's start with the premise of, okay, you pick a node, you go into a map. Your job in this map is to build out your town and manage your resources, and your cards are what you're using to build an iron mine, or a lumber yard, or a military tent, or a housing, or, there are observatory. There are like lots of other structures that have special abilities and do things that cost and also sometimes give you resources. And the point is to build out your town and manage your resources in such a way that you are able to accomplish the winning objective for that particular map. And the art style is beautiful. It's very It's very stylized. It's like one of those um, heavy lined, hand drawn, but the color palette is very. It's not pastel exactly, but it's lighter. It's not like super big on the saturation. It doesn't look washed out. It's just a very cohesive art style that I actually find quite pleasant. I think the art style in this game is actually one of the game's stronger suits. But that's kind of the game, and you're going through these nodes and you're trying to outrun this like darkness that's slowly creeping up behind you on the node map. As you're picking your next map, you can see it rise, and eventually it kind of catches up with you, and you have to do a couple maps that have this encroaching dark purple fog, and if it reaches a certain point in your settlement, then you lose the game, you lose that run, and you have to sort of start over. But you take all of the meta progression materials that you earned completing those other maps, and you go back to sort of like a home base, and you use those to upgrade things, either the base itself to give you access to like a new system or a new mechanic, or the characters. There are actually characters that determine the kind of cards that you have access to when you go out on these maps. And so you can think of the characters as, I guess, like decks of cards. Like they have a certain way or a certain play style, if if you will, when you take them out on a map for a run. But that's the game, and I love it. I've never played something that is this particular combination of card slash settlement game and roguelike. And it really works in the same way that like Against the Storm kind of works in the city building and roguelike mix. Although I guess not for everyone, because there are some people who don't like that particular mix. I really liked this game's. It's like someone looked at Islanders and said, okay, how can we keep it chill but make it roguelike and add cards? And to me, it's just so pleasant to play, and it's really well designed. It doesn't have like this huge massive scope, that's like you feel overwhelmed trying to understand all the different possibilities and placements. And that's not to say that it's like simple. I would actually say after a certain point the game is actually quite difficult. But I've never been stressed playing it, and I think that's just because even if you fail, you're still making progress, and it's so pleasant to play that I don't even feel the stress of like, oh my god, the fog is gonna get me. Oh no, like it's not even a thing that happens in a playthrough for me. So Roots of Yggdrasil is number 7. Excellent game. Actually, I think, is it the cheapest game on this list? I think it is the cheapest game on this list. Yeah. I want to say it's like $17.99 or $14.99 or something like that on Steam. Not sure if it's on Switch or consoles, but perfect Steam Deck game, honestly. If you have a Steam Deck and are looking for something you can just kind of get into in bed or on the couch, for a couple hours before you go to sleep, it's 100% a perfect one of those. So that's number 7. Number 6, which also had an early access period. Toward the end, it was a little rough. But number 6 is Phantom Abyss. And this is the one on the list that I'm willing to bet pretty much none of you have heard of. And that is sad, honestly. So Phantom Abyss is a... Oh man, how to describe Phantom Abyss? Why am I putting games on this list that are so difficult to describe and that people don't know? Phantom Abyss. Okay, here's my pitch. Hello, sir or madam. Would you like to play a game that has no combat, is movement skill based, is a race, has exploring elements, procedural generation, and is also a roguelike. Interested? Might you check out Phantom Abyss? So, the conceit of Phantom Abyss is, let's take the thrill of Indiana Jones raiding a temple and make an entire game around it. That is the conceit of Phantom Abyss. Phantom Abyss, it's not an Indiana Jones game. I'm saying the concept of that. Phantom Abyss is a game where you play a soul trapped in the Phantom Abyss, and you're trying to escape the Phantom Abyss. But in order to do that, you have to sort of conquer the quote-unquote temples of 3 or 4. They're not. They don't say they're like Aztec or Mayan gods, but that's the art style of the game. Like, that's what it's trying to evoke and communicate. And so, you do like 2 or 3 runs. And so these runs, when you start one, it's entirely movement based. You have a whip, and the whip can, let you whip up onto ledges, and your character is running and running, and there's traps all over in the temple that you're trying to avoid, and you can double jump, and you can, you can hit shift, and you can like fly forward in the air, and you're doing all this stuff. And as you progress through the game, you get whips that do different things for you. During a run, you can spend coins on upgrades that give you specific ability, like the ability to float in air for a little bit of time or something like that. All of the levels are procedurally generated, though. I think with the exception of the story ones, maybe. But even those, I feel like, are actually procedurally generated. There is that roguelike story mode, and once you beat it, you can keep playing the game ad nauseum and keep playing procedurally generated temples. There is a time attack mode. There's a daily challenge. There's a weekly challenge, that assign you a specific whip and say, well, this is the map. Good luck. So let's see who can get the fastest, run. But what makes this game kind of really unique and stand out to me, and I really enjoyed the fact that it's kind of just a frictionless game. Like, once you learn the movement, there's no combat, there's no, there's nothing like that. There's nothing that is, like, actively pushing against you or giving you friction as a player, other than just how good you grok how well you grok the movement abilities, and I really, really like that about it. And during runs, you see the ghosts of other players, so you can kind of, there's a leaderboard for every level, and so you can kind of get an idea of how well you're doing, or you can actually even watch other people's ghosts to learn about traps. Like, sometimes the best move is to actually just stop. If you run into a room and you're like, you see all this moving shit, and there's crap falling from the ceiling, and the wall opens and flame comes out. Sometimes the best thing to do is just to stop, watch the ghosts, see where other people died, or like where someone's ghost just disappeared but nothing is happening. Okay, that one's probably got something hidden in the wall, so I need to be very careful over there. It's really interesting game, and I really, really love it. I wish we had more games that came out like this, that didn't have combat, but were that still kind of felt like there's still action to it. There's still there's still a verb in there somewhere. Like, it's not in the same way that like a city builder like City Skylines doesn't have action, but or doesn't have like combat and those sorts of things. But games that are taking what is really just kind of a really simple idea, like Last year, this game came out that was a dungeon crawler, like an old school Legends of Grimrock dungeon crawler, but it used typing as its mechanics. So if you wanted to hit someone, you had to type in hit, or if you wanted to block, you had to type block, and you could try all these different words. Games that are innovating on really simple ideas or singular aspects of a genre, because this is certainly not the first movement-based roguelike type game that has come out. In some ways, it's even riffing off of some of the movement-based stuff that you do in boomer shooters and in first-person shooters like Turbo Overkill and Doom and Ghost Runner. Like, it has those kinds of movement systems. So it's a really interesting, like, half connected, like, what if we just made everyone compete in this temple run filled with traps, and all you have is your Indiana Jones whip and your reflexes. And I love the simplicity, and the gameplay is also super, super excellent. So Phantom Abyss is number 6. Number 5 is Dragon's Dogma 2. I love this game. I think Dragon's Dogma 2 is really good at a lot of the same things that Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, what was the final sort of iteration of that game. Dragon's Dogma 1. Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen was the kind of final package, as it were, with the Dark Arisen content. But regardless of that, it's really good at sort of establishing the world. That said, it's got a lot of the same points of friction that you will have had in the first game, and it's not a game that's going to be for everyone. It's still obtuse in a lot of the ways the first game was obtuse, very, like, obtuse in the way a Dark Souls game is obtuse. It doesn't explain itself very well all the time. It's really easy to fuck yourself over and lose progress. But that also is kind of its greatest strength. Like, it wouldn't have the strength of its sandbox and the reactiveness of its world if it handheld you and explained everything. Then it would just be an Ubisoft game, Like, it would be just another third-person character action RPG where you went around the world and you took icons off a map. That's just all it would be at that point. And that is just so very clearly not the game that they're making. If you don't know what Dragon's Dogma 2 is, it is the sequel to Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, which was a character action RPG adventure game that came out, I think, in the 360 era. I did play the first one back in the day when it first came out. I never finished it and never played any of its DLC content. I have that waiting for me on Switch, actually. But it's that kind of game. Like, if you have played Dragon Age or a Mass Effect, like, it's that, but Japanese. Like, it's got a little more of the Souls games in it than a BioWare RPG does. The combat in Dragon's Dogma 2 is probably where the vast majority of the much improved status can be assigned to this game. The combat is just amazing. I think it's probably my favorite combat of all year. There's a lot of appropriate weight assigned to skills, and just the spectacle of some of the fights that only exists because you happen to do the big wind-up greatsword uppercut, at just the right time to the Griffin to trigger its, auto guard. Like, the spectacle that is created by proper understanding and use of the weapon and weapon abilities and weapon skills. It's a game that really asks you to understand its animations and their timing, and in that sense, it's very much like a Monster Hunter or Souls, action game. The stories are great, the writing is good, the exploration is fun. The pawn system is excellent. There are things I don't like about it, but the reason it's at number 5 on this list is because it didn't compromise on what it wanted to be. And I've seen a lot of talk online since the game came out about how it's a dead game and they just let it wither on the vine and die, but I don't know, like, am I reaching an age where like it's just automatically expected from younger gamers that something like you can't tell a complete story, like there just always has to be more hashtag content on something? Like, why can't we have a game that just tells its story and then is fucking over and you're done playing it? I don't understand this obsession with needing more, or like DLCs or more story or more classes and more map and more, like, it's not that game. And Dragon's Dogma has never, like, it's never chased that. Like the first game got one story expansion, and it would be great if this one got one. I'd be happy, but I'm not expecting it to, and I think judging the game on its own merits as a from start to finish complete thing is a wonderful game. It is. I don't care. Here's what I said to a friend when I was describing why I like Dragon's Dogma 2. It's all the aspects of The Legend of Zelda I like, with none of the aspects of The Legend of Zelda that I do not like. And I typically always end up... I fall off Legend of Zelda games usually pretty hard, simply because I hit a point in the game inevitably where I have to do something in order to progress, and I do it, and I fail at it, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to try and brute force this. Like, I've tried to meet the game on its terms, and now I'm just going to peace out and go play something else because it's not fun anymore. And that's the thing that I really love about Dragon's Dogma 2, is that when you do hit that point, when you do hit that wall, you can go do something else. That is not the end all be all. Whatever thing you're stuck in that game, there are 1,000 other threads for you to chase in that game, and all of them are worth chasing. So that's number 5, Dragon's Dogma 2. Last year, in my opinion, last year's character action RPG masterpiece. Number 4 is a game that was in early access as well for some time and came out last year. It's called Songs of Conquest. This is a beautiful pixel love letter to the old Heroes of Might and Magic games. You know, the ones where you're going around a map with a little dude and his little army, and you're battling stuff, and you're picking up resources next to trees, and you're visiting shrines, and you're using one general to ferry troops out to another on a map, and you're taking over settlements and managing settlements, and it is 1,000% that game, and it is the best one of those I have played probably since Home. I don't know. I actually liked 7. I know it wasn't like a huge hit with people, but it's the best one of these I've played in a very long time. There's a bit of a Heroes of Might and Magic renaissance going on at the moment. We had this game coming out. We had another one just released in early access, a Broken Alliance, I think, which actually incorporates cards into the tactical battles. We have Heroes Hour that came out several years ago. We have a new Heroes of Might and Magic, the Olden Era, coming out soon this year. And then we also had... I'm forgetting what it's called. Not important at the moment. But Songs of Conquest is one of those, and it is a very good one of those. The campaigns are excellent. The map design is fantastic. The faction design is really great. It's just a well-produced and lovingly crafted and designed game. And if you are in any way, shape, or form a tactics fan or a strategy game fan, I think this is the one from last year that I would really recommend you pick up and you play. It's really, really good. And I cannot emphasize enough how beautiful the game is. It probably has some of my favorite art from the last 10 years or so. Like, just the visuals of the game are extremely impressive. Number three. So these next three, I really thought about a long time on how I should handle ranking these three, and I struggled quite a bit, but eventually landed on an order that I could live with. But in various iterations of this list, all of these games were at number one at one point in time. Number three is Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 is a game that lets you be a very, very angry Space Marine. And I honestly don't think I have to say anything fucking else. And if I do, then you don't know Warhammer, and you might as well consider this a top 9 list. Also, we're no longer friends. No, Space Marine 2, man. Where to even start with this one? So, let's start with a short description of what the game actually is. This is in the same kind of way that Grand Blue Fantasy Relink was riffing off of the old character action games, like the Konami and, Koei Tecmo character action games. Space Marine 2 is like, it's taking that, but focusing and drawing angst and orneriness from games like the old God of War games and that old, like, Achilles game or Spartan game or whatever the hell it was called. Those, like, really gory, bloody PS2, PS3 era, like, crank the violence and mature themes up to 12 and have a nice day. So it's third person. The story is tackling, I believe, the fall of Cadia. And if you're a Warhammer 40k fan, that is a thing that is well known to you, and there's a lot of tie-ins in other games. Like Darktide even has a character personality that you can pick for the character you make, where they were a veteran Imperial soldier in the battles for the fall of Cadia. And Sergeant Morrow even participated in the battles at Cadia. So it's content that immediately will draw in any fan, but you don't have to be a fan to enjoy this game. And its structure is really what works for me. So the Space Marine 2 structure, it has its story, which, my God, it is... I didn't know that I still loved the old school PS2 Xbox era structure of telling an action game story. Like, going from, like, the mission structure, like this mission, this mission, this mission, and then having set pieces within those missions where things happen. Sometimes in cutscenes, sometimes the set piece is happening as you are playing the game. It's just brilliant. Like, that's the thing that really pushes Space Marine 2 over the edge for me, is that, similar to another game in the top 3, when it comes to the experience, like when and how my jaw hit the floor playing the game, Space Marine 2 had many, 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 many moments like that. Sometimes it was because of its technical prowess, like the sheer number of Tyranids it would put on the screen at any given time. Some of it was the set piece, like the camera focusing up towards something and it happening and then coming back down and pulling back into the action. And as you begin controlling the character, the aftermath of that camera pan is happening in front of you. Sometimes you're walking into it and you feel it's extremely immersive. It's similar to how I described Darktide, and the year that I put Darktide on one of these lists, these top tens. It's so good at building the atmosphere that it has placed you in, that you can't help but be just completely immersed and taken by it. And it like I said, like another game on this list, it accomplishes that so well. The structure of it is also very interesting. So it has the traditional story campaign, and you can replay those missions, and they have various difficulties that will change, kind of where enemies spawn and the number of enemies that spawn. It also can be played entirely cooperatively. The campaign can. And the game also has what are called operations. And these operations are specific co-op missions that have matchmaking. You can also do them with friends. But what's interesting about these, and also interesting about the single-player story the story campaign, is these operations are telling the story of other squad members of the main character in the missions that you play in the campaign. So you play as Titus in the campaign. And if you play co-op campaign, the co-op story, there are times where the game actually splits your squad up. So you and one squad mate will be doing one thing during a mission, and then another squad mate gets separated, and they are off doing their own thing for a little bit until you all come together again. That's really cool. I love that. But for the operations missions, you are playing, during the story missions, Titus and his two other squad members are constantly chattering. There's 6 guys total. And so it's always Titus and 2 other dudes who are doing one tasked with one thing in a mission, and then the 3 other dudes who go off and are tasked with another thing during the mission. And your radio chattering, oftentimes what you're doing is dependent on something, the other squad doing something, or vice versa. Like what they need to do is dependent on you and your squad accomplishing your part of the mission. The operations are from the perspective of the 3 squad mates you don't play as during the story campaign. And it's really cool and interesting to play through those operations and see the flip side of the coin. Like, it feels in some ways like a continuation of the campaign story, just from a different perspective. And it's just cool. Like, it's a cool idea. I don't think I've ever played a game that does that. It also has PvP. I haven't played any of the PvP. I don't really have an interest in the PvP. It is getting a big update here in the first half of this year, that's going to add a horde mode, just like the first game had. I know a lot of people are waiting for that and are very, very excited for that. It also is probably, do I want to say this? Is this true? There's some good-looking games on this list. It's probably tied with Dragon's Dogma 2. Looks really good. There's another game in this top 3 that I think gives it a run for its money, but I think Space Marine and that other game are probably the visual, like, graphics technical, not like graphics style. I think it's one of the most impressive games I've played in a very long time. It looks very, very good, and that also contributes to the spectacle and the atmosphere and the immersion of the game. Space Marine 2, excellent video game, 100% something I would encourage everyone who is for the Emperor to play. Number two, oh, this feels bad. The top three in general feels bad because, like I said, they were each number one on the list at some point in time. Number two is Unicorn Overlord. Holy shit, Vanillaware did it again. Vanillaware, hey, newsflash everyone, Vanillaware made a game in a genre and managed to do something so totally different with that genre that everyone went, oh my god, this is brilliant. Why haven't we been making games like this in this genre before? Unicorn Overlord is just the complete package. It's an SRPG. It has, it's an auto battler ish, but it's so good. The story is good. The way you like move around the map and collect things and upgrade your characters and upgrade the towns and buy things from the shop, and then because it's an auto battler, you make little squads. And then during fights, you deploy these squads, and these squads move around a little focused, kind of zoomed in tactical map. And when you run into another unit, it goes into like the auto battle mode, right? And so there are a bunch of rules that govern combat, and you can assign rules and you know orders for your specific characters and stuff to sort of follow when auto battle is engaged. So you are able to kind of program how you want a unit to act. But it's it's just fucking excellent. Like Unicorn Overlord is really 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 good, and I don't really know what else to say about it other than if you're a tactics fan and a SRPG fan and you haven't played it, you are missing out. Like this is one that you should definitely play. I would also just point out really strong writing, which is a breath of fresh air. I have a friend, Alex, and he and I play an awful lot of poorly written, really bad turn-based tactic RPG games. And let me tell you, there are a lot of them on Steam, even. Um, Unicorn Overlord is amazing. And I don't really have anything else to say. I can't really talk about the story because there's some spoilery stuff, but let's say it starts out as your typical everyone is assassinated, you must save the kingdom, build an army type story. Build a resistance, if you will. The places you go and the things that you will see throughout that story are amazing. The tactical battles are amazing. The unit management and programming your dudes and their character progression and their gear progression, all of that is really really good. And that is all of that is the reason it's number 2 on this list. Number 1 is Helldivers 2. Now, I can hear some people groaning, and I can hear some people cheering. In a lot of ways, Helldivers 2 is and is not completely my kind of game. It is my type of game in the sense that it's cooperative. It's got a repetitive gameplay structure. I actually tend to like games like that, which is one of the reasons I like roguelikes so much. So I'm okay with repetition, but I like that repetition to lead to progression in some way, meta progression or what have you. But I'm not that into games that like tend to simulate like semi-realistic or realistic systems and mechanics like movement and aiming and weapon sway and air physics and physics. A lot of that stuff typically it puts me off of games. It's one of my major points of friction with the From Software games. Helldivers 2, however, manages to take those things that I don't typically like about these types of games and make it such a core part of the experience that this would be a lesser game if those things were not in the game. I don't think I need to tell you about Helldivers 2. If you play video games, at some point you heard about it or you saw a clip of it. It was all over the internet. It was all anybody was playing for a long time there. Regardless of how you feel about its various ups and downs since then, although I would say sometimes trying to suss out what the Helldivers 2 community actually wants must make the developers want to slit their wrists, because I think more than a lot of other games and game developers, they are finding out that you really can't please everyone. And so they're eventually going to have to make some choices about the kind of game they want to have and kind of game they want to make, and the people that don't want to play it anymore they're just going to have to be okay with those people not playing it anymore. As one of the designers himself said, in trying to make a game for everyone, you will end up making a game for no one. Helldivers 2 is, I don't know, I probably put 120, 130, 40 hours into it or something like that in 2024. It's a game I will play for many, many years to come. And like other games I've put at number one on this list in the past, it just has a singular focus of design that is so impressive to me. Every single aspect of it, from the little character barks during missions, to the visuals, to the way sand or snow kicks up from your boot when you walk, the reticle system, the weapon sway, the crouching, the movement, the audio, the way everything is designed and feels and fits together is, nothing feels out of place, and nothing feels like it doesn't belong there, and that in and of itself is impressive. But this was the other game I also was talking about when I was talking about Space Marine 2 and how good it was at developing an atmosphere and an immersion. There are moments in Helldivers 2 where my jaw hit the ground. There are things that have happened in that game that I will remember forever, that will make top 10 gaming moments lists, like setting off your first nuke in Helldivers 2, calling down your first rail strike on a Bile Titan, eating the first charge from a charger, getting tongue whipped by a stalker for the first time, your first accidental team kill. There are just so many things and moments, and the fact that you get to share them with other people. None of my friends regrettably play Helldivers 2. None of my close friends that I regularly game with. And my husband refuses to play it with me. It's just not his kind of game. My other closest gaming friend also refuses to play it with me, as he says it's not his kind of game. So I am left to kind of play Helldivers 2 by myself. And the only thing that's happened the entire time I've played that game, yeah, you get a sour apple every now and again. But my friends list in Helldivers 2 is full of people that, that I play with. And not regularly, not seriously. If I see them on, if they see me on, we hop in a squad and we go do some missions. And we create and share time together and memories together in those missions. And there are, like I said, there are just moments in my gaming that I will not ever forget that have come from Helldivers 2. There's an awful lot of them. And it's just the game. I tend to put at number one games that I had, where I carried part of the experience with me outside of the game, or I reflected on the experience outside of the game. And while I was playing it, it didn't necessarily feel like I was playing a video game, in the same way that playing Millennia very clearly feels like playing a video game, and Phantom a bit, all of these other games. But Space Marine 2 and Helldivers 2, I legitimately sometimes forgot. I was so pulled into the moment and what was going on that I forgot I was playing a video game. And those moments as a gamer, they make me very happy. You know, like those are the moments that I chase. That's the feeling that I chase. And Helldivers 2 delivers on that every single time I log in. Every single time I log in. It's extremely high production value. It it it's not perfect, but it's the closest to perfect I have had a video game come for me in a very long time. And I think its continued popularity and its uh, the dedication of its fan base and the reason people still play it is a testament to that. We'll go ahead and leave it there. Them's the top 20. Jesus, could you imagine? I could. I mean, I've got 10 more underneath Millennia, but I don't think you guys have another hour and 20 minutes. So we'll go ahead and end it here. Thank you for tuning into last year's top 10 video games of 2024. And I will see you. Every month, I write down games that I play that I want to make sure I come back to and think about for this list. So I will see you again, hopefully this year, if not in January of next year, for last year's top 10 video games of the year. Take care, everyone.